What up, though? This your brother Mike X.
My killers got them suits on like followers of Farrakhan.
And welcome to the 17 Winners Podcast, the realest podcast in the game.
I'm the jig in my city. Yeah. I'm not saying they not good. Nah. I'm just saying I'm the realest. Facts.
And I guess I will follow up with that and say that there's nothing that I am uncomfortable with speaking about. So don't feel like it's the touchy subject. So, that being said, I believe that I was supposed to go to prison. Not because I committed an armed robbery and was caught. Of course, I believe that I was supposed to go to prison for committing an armed robbery and getting caught. But I also think I was supposed to go to prison because my mom and dad both were victims of the crack era or the crack epidemic. My dad is recently fighting to overcome his addiction. I just turned 43 years old. My mom was able to kick it, but she struggled for a few years in my younger years, maybe from my 7 or 8 years old till about 11. But I also believe that I was supposed to go to prison because my dad went to prison for armed robbery around the same age that I went to prison for armed robbery. And I also believe that I was supposed to go to prison because when I got to prison and I looked around and I had conversations, I learned that my story was not as unique as I thought it was. My story is connected to a bigger story, and that is the story of mass incarceration. When I got to prison, the more that I explored, the more that I had conversations, the more that I did the work to fix me, if there's a such thing as a broken me, the more that I did that introspective work and the more that I did the building on myself, the more that I uncovered so many more young black men that were just like me. And then I realized that it couldn't be like a coincidence that so many of us had the same story. I want to tell you guys a story. So I served 17 years for armed robbery. I went to prison when I was 18 years old. I came home when I was 33 years old, and then I did 2 more years on parole. At about my 12th year in prison, at that point in time, I could probably count how many times I had cried in my life that I could remember. And I'll tell you the number was 5. I could remember, at that time it was 4. That was the 5th time. But this time was a different type of cry. I was standing in the day room at St. Louis Correctional Facility. The level 1, I had recently gone back to court for an appeal of my sentence and got a resentence. So I originally started with 16 to 40 or 192 months to 40 years. And it was reduced to 180 months to 40 years. So I had a year taken off and I was almost home. I had about 3 years left. And I was watching, if you remember a while ago, Roots used to come on TV, the movie Roots. And I was watching Roots. And there was a day room like full of people. And it was kind of just on the screen. Nobody was really watching it, but it was one of those like Westerns on TV. And I happened to get locked into a scene. And the scene was a scene with Chicken George talking to, I believe it was Kizzy, his daughter, and maybe his wife. And they were discussing a deal between 2 of the masters, the master at the plantation that they lived on at the time, and the master at the plantation that Chicken George was about to be sold to. And the deal between the masters was that Chicken George would be sold for 5 years, and then he'd be able to come back to the plantation and be reunited with his family. But everybody kind of knew in the back of their minds that once you're sold off, you're like barter or whatever you call it, you're never going to see your family again. And I remember watching that scene and Chicken George explaining to his family how the situation was going to go and how he'd be back home. And I started uncontrollably crying. And when I say uncontrollably, like I could not stop for hours. And I didn't know why. I tried to call home and nobody could explain it to me. I barely could get the words out. But nobody could help me internalize or work through why I was crying or why that felt so close to me. And I went and got on my bunk for the rest of the day. I didn't come back off of my bunk. And it wasn't until recently that I started to uncover why that affected me the way that it did. These days, I do a lot of work with what they call trouble youth, and a lot of work with reentry for formerly incarcerated individuals, both of which I was and am. When I'm doing this work, all I see is evidence of mass incarceration. All I'm reminded of is the fact that I'm not alone in this. This is happening, and it continues to happen. It continues to be a thing that, like, we're dealing with, and we want to fix, but the solutions are systemic, not individual. I don't know that when I say that I was supposed to go to prison, I mean it from the perspective that I don't know that anybody else could tell the story the way that I tell the story. I don't know that anybody else felt it the way that I feel it. I've been home 10 years. I'm still going through reentry issues as I'm navigating others' reentry issues. What I'm learning is, in large part, what do they call it? The way that you get to live, your access to resources. Mm-hmm. That alone changes the trajectory. It gives you just the option of doing different. I don't remember having many opportunities for things. I just had a couple of multiple choice answers, right? That's the way that I always identified my path to prison. My dad was in prison with me. My friends' dads were in prison with me. My dad just got out of prison again. So this thing isn't just like a me problem. This is a we thing. Locking people up without helping with the pathway to return is a recipe for continued disaster. There's no real solution in that. To assume that people commit crimes just because they're bad, when I don't think I was committing crimes because I was bad. I had examples, and I lacked examples. Some examples made it make sense to commit robbery. My violence wasn't based on anger. It was based on pathology. It was based on what I thought was the right answer. When I learned more answers, I started answering differently. But until I got different answers, there was no way to answer differently. I have to answer the way that I know.
You mind talking about the actual crime itself, like what led up to it, and the circumstances?
So yeah, that's no problem. So I was 18. Oh, I don't blame it on. I take full accountability. Like I was on a robbing spree. I was going down a bad path. Um,
Were you alone?
no, it was me and my best friend, who's still my best friend, and who is a navigator for Advanced Pieces, gun violence intervention in Lansing. So yeah.
So both of you are working together?
Yes. You're on different spectrums of the problem. So he interrupts direct gun violence, like the people that are doing gun violence. He's in the middle of getting into those conflicts and navigating that. I have a program that I facilitate that talks to them before they get involved in the gun violence, and then of course I'm in reentry as well. So yes, we both were able to make our way out of that. But so, like, to get back to the question, yes. So I was 18 and I was on a robbing spree, partly because I had gotten to the point where I felt power in robbing. So if I backtrack a little bit, my entry into violence was about 12, 13, when I decided that I was not going to continue to lose fights. So about 13 is when I got like access to a gun. Also the first time I tried to sell crack. And also the time when I caught my first case. So that was really my introduction to the street. By 15, I had shot somebody for the first time. So from that point on, I had my mind made up that I was a gangster and that this is what I was going to be and that this was the way to go. I had a disdain for crack dealers, partly because I wasn't good at it, and partly because my mom and dad both smoked crack, and I felt a way about the way that it affected my family. So when I was introduced to armed robbery, I felt justified if I robbed dope dealers. I didn't feel like I was doing anything bad. I thought it was like part of the circle of life when it came to the streets, and y'all are doing the worst stuff, so like I'm just getting back. So that was what led me there. By 17, that was what in the streets we call my hustle. So my hustle was robbing dope dealers. And that's where I got my high. That's where I got my money. That's where I got my reputation.
Can I ask a question? Who introduced you? Who kind of mentored you into this life? I mean, how did you learn to go about this?
If we're talking about armed robbery, the first armed robbery I committed was, it was me and about 3 friends. Mm-hmm. One of our friends had gotten arrested for some stolen cars, and we didn't have the money to get him out, and our idea was to rob somebody to get the money. Okay. But I was the only one that had the courage at the time, I guess I believed it was, to do it. Mm-hmm. I was the only one that had the nuts to do it. So once I did that, it made me stand out in the crew. I was no longer just one of the guys. Yeah. I was now one of the leaders.
You were on the younger end of the crew, or you were
kind of in the middle. Okay. Like I'm 43. I probably got a couple of friends that are 45, mm-hmm. and a couple that are like 42. So we range around there. Yeah. But I was originally from out of town. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. And we came to Michigan, mm-hmm. Through some travels with my mom and dad's addiction. So we were in Dallas, they became addicted. We ended up in Atlanta. My dad went to prison in Atlanta, and we were homeless in Atlanta, and we had to come back here where my mom grew up for her to get a restart, and to, get off drugs, which she did, and she rebuilt herself here. And we got here when I was about 11. So I also dealt with being the new kid and being the little kid and being, so I dealt with bully issues, but I internalized that as I have to be more aggressive um, than everybody else. And once I got to that point, my mom says the movie Menace to Society is what caused the light bulb switch for me. She says the movie Menace to Society, Menace to Society, came out about 1993, like the same year that I moved to Lansing from Atlanta. It was when that movie Menace to Society came out. And my mom says that's when she recognized that there was a switch in me. And I identified with the character O-Dog to the extent that I tried to emulate that.
What was going on at school at the
Um,
time?
I've never not been a smart kid, but I believe fitting in meant more to me than school. I didn't really see a future in school. I didn't see success in school. So if I was the coolest kid, I would probably be more successful than the smartest.
A really random question. What else were you good at? Like as a teenager?
Drawing.
Drawing?
Drawing. I was a really good artist. The gene passed to both my baby brother and baby sister. I was a really good artist. The last thing I did was a portrait of all of my favorite artists together on a collage type of thing. I was an artist.
Being in prison, I have to tell you, the first time I ever had to go behind the walls, I had this horrible, when RDC, which is where new prisoners into the system come into Michigan. As an employee of the Department of Corrections, before I started a different road, we had to go inside. And when those gates closed behind me, there was this awful, awful feeling. And it was like, but the thing that I realized, I have a choice, I can leave. I have that opportunity. So my respect for those people who are still there is probably why I went back to teach inside the walls, was that same process of those gates closed. But unless I treat you as a human being, I never taught prisoners, I taught students and men who wanted to advance and get better. But one of the things I see now, I live on the south side, and a lot of my neighbors are scared. And we do have our gangs, and they're scared and they don't know what to do. And I said, well, have you ever said hello? Have you ever reached out and said, hey, I'm growing strawberries in my backyard, you want to pick some, Or have you seen strawberries grow? Or as Malik knows very well that I have a big garden, you need something? Or I've given away pumpkins, I've given away stuff. But unless we as a community support those young men, and I'm sorry, but I don't see it happening in my neighborhood, so I'm so glad that you have a mentoring program. I have to tell you, I'm a substitute teacher, and I don't want to do kids. I'm sorry. I am old. And one of them kids pushed me down, I'll be down on the ground forever. But I respect that. I respect that kids are learning differently. We talked a little bit about that earlier. I respect the fact that kids are learning differently. Your children are going to learn a whole lot differently than you. I'm so glad you're here. So and hear what you have to say.
Sure.
I also am a victim of many things, but about 10 years ago, I was raped in my home.
Mm.
And it was very difficult. The thing that bothers me most about it, and that's why I asked you about the public defender, my attacker had a public defender. And the court system really wanted this guy. I'll be real honest. He didn't deserve what he got. He got 28 years. You know, every year I get a letter from the Department of Corrections. But the system isn't working for our young men. It really isn't. I mean, when I read over the statement they said I made, I said, I didn't say those things. I said, no, I did not.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
And also, when he comes up for parole, which I'm hoping is soon, who's going to be in the front row? I'm going to say, you railroaded this man. He got 2 years for the rape and 20 years for taking a camera off my dresser. So my thought is, I'm going to be in the front row. And I can't do what you do, only because I've not been where you've been. I can help you, you know, in a lot of different ways. I can tutor, I can do all those other things, but I can't be that role model that you have become. So your children and your family should be very proud.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. So appreciate that. We got only about 5 minutes.
Wait, back to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you were 17,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a pattern, and this was your thing, robbing dope dealers.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Lansing dried up for me, so I started going out of town to do it. And I got caught out of town.
Detroit?
Benton Harbor.
Oh, Benton Harbor.
Yep, I went to Benton Harbor on this one. I visited Detroit too.
Okay.
But Benton Harbor was the one I got caught in. And that's when I learned another lesson that I later realized while in prison about systemic racism and the consequences of just being black in the wrong place. So if you've ever been to or heard of Benton Harbor, it is a twin city. St. Joe and Benton Harbor are Berrien County. And on one side of that bridge looks a whole lot different than the other. And I happen to have caught my case on the wrong side of that bridge. I didn't know that when I went down there. And I happened to be from the wrong city. Apparently Lansing's not favored down there. So I got to learn, which is part of how I was able to get an appeal and get some of the time reduced, because the intention was to railroad and set an example out of me down there, which was done. The example was laid. I don't think that it stopped any others from doing it, but an example was still made. But getting back to the book, I appreciate Mary highlighting that she can't do what I do. Because when I started, I said that I believe I was supposed to go to prison.
Right.
But the reasons that I went to prison, the committing of the crime and all of that, although like those are bad things, and like I don't like take away my blame or guilt for those things. I recognize that there are reasons why those things even made sense to me and in my community. And that going to prison and going through what I went through, because if you ask my mom, if you ask my family, if you asked anybody who knew me prior to my street introduction, they would say there was no way that he was on the trajectory to prison. I was a straight A student. I've always been a good kid. But I fell through the same crack that so many did. So there was no coincidence there. But I believe, like I say, that I went to prison for a reason. And that is to be the credible messenger that I am. To be the one that can stand up and talk about it the way that I can. To represent with the 17 Winters podcast, to be able to write a book about my reentry transition in order to help others do it. Because this mass incarceration thing, for me, is bigger than just my own story. It's a bigger story. It is realistically, it is the only way to get America back even, is to like reinvestigate this thing from a real honest lens. So I guess that's my part.
Yeah, Mike. So close to the thing, I got 2 points to talk to you. The first one is appreciation. The second one is a kind of a guidance question. So let's start with appreciation. You are doing a fantastic job after the troubled early youth part, and particularly about the mentoring and guiding the troubled youth. And then you are also advocating for systemic racism and systemic something against mass incarceration. That's all noble thing for a person who has come to this kind of background, and we really appreciate that. Okay, and then I will come to this kind of intriguing question to you. Okay, it's a question. You can take whatever form you wanted to take. So, at one point you said that you have a skill of artists, drawings, right? Somehow it fell into the cracks. Okay, you didn't put enough efforts onto that into developing that hobby or a career or something, because something else pushed you into a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not worried about that part. Now I'm just going to be connecting the very path that you are already taken, mentoring the youth of troubled youth, right? What are you doing to your own children so that they do not fall into the same trap?
That's a great question. My mom actually just called me and asked that question last night. How do you talk to your students? Do you respect your children the same way that you respect your students? And essentially, that's what I'm doing. I am the same, because a lot of times you tend to speak over the people that are the closest to you and you miss them. Mm-hmm. So I am very adamant about my nephews. I got nephews that were like 10, 11, 9 when I came home, and they're all grown men, and they've been watching me for the last 10 years. So I am intent about talking to them, and talking to their friends, and talking to my boys, and like making sure that I can not only talk directly to my boys, but the trickle down comes too, because not only would my father have been a good example for me, but the other men around could have been a good example too. So I'm trying to build a team, so to speak, that reflect my values now.
Thank you, Mike. Can I give you a hug?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate Mike, not only for that, he has stepped in at the last minute, because unfortunately the previous other person who was supposed to be our live book, somehow she was not able to make it. So I was hard pressed to find an alternative within a few days, and then there was a Saturday, Sunday in between. I was a little bit kind of tensed up, because I normally don't get tensed up, but there is one instance where I got tensed up, because having the launch meeting with the live book is different than having a launch meeting without a live book. And thank you, Mike, for the stepping up. Really,
Yes,
really
sir.
good. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Couple of things. I'm on to the next door, and I'm on to the Facebook. I share the link. So I'm planning to put something about today's launch thing onto the both, either today or tomorrow. Next door as well as the Facebook. Whoever is on the next door, I'm not going to be too elaborative on what happened here. It's going to be very concise, because my focus, the broader focus, is the Voices of Ingham Human Library, and then a live book and listeners are part of that. So I'm not going to emphasize the book part of it, or I'm not going to emphasize the reader part of it, or the audience part of it. I'm going to emphasize the voice of the Human Library part of it. But I request all other people who are already on the next door or Facebook to supplement my post, or even do your own post. talk something positive about what you experienced here. Okay. So, Mike, do you give us permission to use whatever you told, a small part of it, onto the platform like Nextdoor and Facebook?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
For sure.
So you have got the given the permission. So, but when you are putting it conscious about the sensitivity, but highlight the lessons, highlight the positives. That's more important. Like Mike, like the next one is going to be some other live book, having a totally different, unique story. So it is going to continue. I plan to do it on a monthly basis. We'll talk about during the brainstorm, but each meeting will be a different live